Hey there, thanks for joining me as we explore some ideas on how to take Discover Education textbook offline. And you're here to get some ideas. I hope to fuel your imagination and creativity as you explore Discover Education social studies, science, math, textbook, as well as Streaming Plus, and think about ways that you can showcase those resources in an offline environment. And when I say offline, I don't mean just downloading the videos or printing out the images. I mean really making a connection to the experiences in TechBook and in Plus that you can showcase in a limited technology, in a classroom that has limited technology, or in a district that feels that they're not ready because they don't have enough technology. So for this example, we're going to look at social studies textbook, and we're going to look at life in the colonies. And I recently did this in DC public schools. And actually, this is the second time we've done it in DC public schools. And the task was, hey, can you show us what social studies and science textbook look like in an offline environment or in a limited technology environment? But don't just show it to us in the lens of social studies. Can you make some connections to ELA? And oh, by the way, we're going to run through all of our teachers through this activity. So our math teachers and our special ed teachers and our ELA and science and pretty much everybody, even our phys ed teachers, they're going to come through this activity. And can you make connections for them as well? Because DCPS knows, just like you know, that all teachers in the school have access to the resource. So with that in mind, I thought about going into social studies textbook and going into colonial life multiple perspectives and into the elaborate section there to first use this digital resource in an offline environment. And that digital resource is this interactive diving into multiple perspectives. Multiple perspectives is rife throughout all of the textbooks in social studies, whether it be world history or U.S. history or civics or world geography and cultures. There's lots of different multiple perspective interactives there. And multiple perspectives are also great door openers for talking about ELA. So the first thing I did was, once I knew about this particular interactive, was go to the teacher's guide to get some ideas. How might I break up this activity in an offline experience? And what I liked about our teacher's guide here is, if you dive into it deeper, is that it's not just, hey, have your kids on a computer and go through step by step, next by next in the interactive, but it really does break up each thing. So each part of the digital interactive has building background information, meeting different people, exploring their perspectives, and so forth. And the procedure prompts the teacher to break up that activity. So don't just have kids sitting on the computer. Actually walk them through some of those pieces and stop and pause for peer reflection and so forth. So it's a really great activity, digital or offline. And I think that's a great thing to point out when you're demonstrating social studies textbook or any of our textbooks for that matter. So we're going to launch this activity just so you can get an idea of what it looks like if you haven't seen it before. So we have these introductions here, and what I did, you'll see in a little bit, just took a screen capture of this information. And the object is we're going to meet these 4 individual people. So if we click on each individual: Harriet, an enslaved African; Teacott, a Native American; Elizabeth, wife of a northern farmer; or Robert, a southern plantation owner, we can see a little bit about them. And we can read a little bit or have read aloud, if you're using the digital experience, that information to us. So I took that information in an offline experience, and I'll show you how I did that. So once you've gotten to meet each one of these individuals, you then can explore some of their perspectives as it relates to different questions. So in DC public schools, they call them compelling questions. We also call them essential questions. And these are 3 questions that are posed that you have to decide from the point of view of whomever the individual that you're examining, what would they say? So is life easier on a southern plantation than on a small farm in the northern colonies, and so forth. So we looked at each 3 of those questions. And in this particular question, issue 1 of 1, is life easier? we have to look at it through the perspective of Harriet, the enslaved African, Teacup, the Native American, Elizabeth, the wife of a northern farmer, Robert, the southern plantation owner. We have to decide yay or nay, or I don't know. I'm kind of neutral on that position, that question. You have to select each one of those and then state your reasoning why. And then if you did this digitally, you could see the historical perspectives. There's also a summary that rolls everything up. I didn't use that in the offline experience. So that's how the digital piece works. I then had an idea of how I wanted to break it up, and I put everything into a presentation mode. So you can use PowerPoint. I used Google Docs here. And the first thing I did was, right out of the gate here, this first idea, step one, was right out of the teacher's guide. So it prompts the teacher to ask the students to write down 3 words or phrases that you think of when you think of colonial life, and a 1-sentence justification for each word. Because I was crunched on time when we went through this activity, and we had about 10 minutes per group, and I had a group of anywhere from 3 to 6 people going through this activity, I ended up on the fly changing this to just give me 1 sentence on or phrase that you think of for colonial life. So 3 words and 1 phrase about when you hear the words colonial life, what do you think of? And I had them do that individually. And then as a group, they reviewed that information and looked for commonality. So individually, they wrote down this stuff. And then as a group, they reviewed and looked for commonalities. Are there any common words that they found that came up out of their writings, or any similarities that they could enter into these 3 boxes? So there was discussion there, and I think you can start to see those ELA connections as well. So then I took screenshots. So you saw this first on the introduction here. Here's our 4 individuals that we're going to meet, and this is a screenshot of that first page. But what I added was the breadcrumb to how I got to this particular page here. And then here are the 4 individuals. So I just did a screenshot of what they might say or what they would say in the interactive. And then I went into Discover Education and I found primary source material that matched up. So no longer are they cartoons. I actually tried to find, to the best of my abilities, pictures or real life artifacts that matched up with the person. So Harriet Tubman, Teacup the Native American, a picture of a colonist who you can't really tell if it's a female or male. I needed a wife of a northern farmer. That's a pretty specific ask inside textbook that I couldn't find, so I fudged it a little bit here. And then Robert, a southern plantation owner. So in the first section, in the first part of this activity, this was one center here, where I had the group of 3 in sequential order go through, or group of 6, go through and individually fill out this information. Once we had that background knowledge established, then we went into the second part of this center. So I had a mini center here where they had to read about each one of these individuals. They could read aloud to one another. They could read to themselves and discuss and represent what they thought they learned from each one of these individuals. But that was the second center. So they had to get to know the individuals in the second mini center. And in the third mini center, they got up and moved to the next section, where as a group, they looked at those questions. Is life easier on a southern plantation than on a small farm in the northern colonies? And they had to place an individual next to each of the yes, no, and neutral boxes. So what I did was I cut up each one of these pictures. So I had printed these out, remember, as slides, and then I cut them into 4 individual pictures. And then the group's job was to go to each question and discuss with one another, who might say yes, no, or neutral to each one of those questions, and they had to place the picture of that person on each one of those boxes and discuss why. And I prompted them to go back to the text that you see up here on the screen to cite their evidence. So they couldn't just say, Harriet would say no to a particular question, without saying, Harriet would say no because in the text it says this. So that was the activity. And the connections that we made outside of social studies textbook were pretty cool. So we had a music teacher come through, and I asked, how might you use music to complement this social studies textbook activity? And she said, oh man, this is great because we look at hymnals a lot in my teaching in this first unit of study. So this would be a great connection for using hymnals and music. And in science, the teacher said, well, there's a lot of technology that's used on the farms back then, even then. So what types of technology could they be used then and compare it to farming technology today? And the math person chimed in and said, well, yeah, they also had to use, they had to use math to figure out how many seeds were they going to plant or predict the weather. Even back then, how could they use the weather patterns to plant? So that was some connections that were made outside of social studies, and I hope that it's fueled your curiosity and your imagination as you think about using TechBook in an offline environment, whether it be an interactive or whatever. I'm so excited to see your thoughts. Thanks.